Yo, what's up, everyone? I'm joined all the way from Tokyo, Japan, by my bro, Aaron Henerae. What's up, my man? Nice to talk with you today.
Kia ora, bro. Good to see you. It's been a while.
It has been a
Um,
while. I can't remember when I last actually saw you in real life.
I think it was the not last time I was back, the time before, because I couldn't come train last time. I almost broke my neck.
That will be it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Let's launch right into it. How did you nearly break your neck?
It was during a tour. So we started from the top of Japan and worked our way all down to the bottom of Japan. And wrestling, of course, the people jumping off the top ropes. This one time, the guy jumped off the top rope, and instead of landing on my chest, he landed right on the top of my head. And it was super lucky that I wasn't paralyzed or anything. But yeah,
Damn.
the disc spewed out onto my spine, and I was out the whole time.
Out as in unconscious.
Out like after the tour ended, I just couldn't move. It was like it wasn't paralysis. It was the spinal cord being pushed by the disc that just burst. So thank God for modern technology. It only took a few months to heal up.
Damn. Well, that's a wonderful introduction to anyone who's watching this or listening to this, that you're a professional wrestler, like WWE, WCW style, but
Yeah.
the Japanese version, right?
Yeah, so in Japan it's called a strong style pro wrestling, which it's pretty much what pro wrestling was supposed to be before WWE turned it into like a drama soap opera type of thing, which I myself don't consider wrestling, and the WWE themselves don't call themselves wrestling. They call themselves sports entertainment, just to differentiate what they are.
Damn,
But yeah,
how did you get into such like like
odd.
atypical profession? What led you to wrestling? What led you to Japan, man? That's interesting.
I say it all the time, like Māori kids, we love watching wrestling on a Friday, Saturday night. So me and my cousin, since I was either 3 or 4, every Friday, every Saturday, would watch WCW and WWF, which a lot of other Kiwi kids did as well. And it was just like not an obsession, but like something that motivated me. Oh my God, there's these guys with makeup and giant muscles and this hyper masculine guys. They're so strong. It's such a cool thing to me. So I always wanted to be a wrestler.
That's
Um,
that's awesome. And so from did you start like collegiate style Greco-Roman wrestling when you were a little kid to
uh,
pursue that goal?
so it was real hard to find a wrestling school. But I found Dilworth Wrestling, which I think is the top in New Zealand. So I think I was either 12 or 13 when I started wrestling there, because I didn't know it was available. Not like the States, you could go to any college and there's a big wrestling program. In New Zealand, it's real small. But yeah, so I started that and I was like, hey, hang on a second, this isn't the same as what I saw on the TV. But then I kept going, was quite good, made the national champion at a few points there. And then in 2014, opportunity presented itself, which gave me a trial in Japan. So I took that, and here I am now.
Wow, it's nearly 8 years later. That's amazing. So how does one transition from, I guess, competitive Greco-Roman wrestling to the more performative element of wrestling that you're doing now, which is obviously the commercial wrestling?
Yeah. So it's like in Japan, they still have the martial arts sort of sport aspect of wrestling. So unlike WWE, where you're not allowed to hit each other, they do the little pitter patters. You've probably seen some of the stuff I put up. We're actually kicking each other. We're actually like hitting each other. And that's like because in Japan, they respect the whole foundation of martial arts. Like Muay Thai, actually, Tiger Mask, he's one of the early pioneers of Japanese wrestling, was a Muay Thai trained.
Oh
So
wow. Okay.
yeah,
So he's from those knees, my man.
yeah. The guy who started the company that I'm in now, New Japan, represent, Antonio Inoki. I'm not sure if you know him, but he fought Muhammad Ali in the first modern MMA fight. and that was in New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Wow, that is a dope story.
Yeah, yeah. There's a photo of Inoki's on the ground kicking Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad Ali is just like, what the hell is he doing?
I will admit ignorance. I didn't even know Muhammad Ali fought in some form of mixed martial arts tournament. How did that work out?
It was weird. It was the classic wrestler versus boxer match, but both sides had weird stipulations. So Inoki was only allowed to strike if he was on the ground. He's a wrestler, so he's like ground based, And Muhammad Ali wasn't allowed to punch him when he was on the ground.
Oh, yeah.
So the whole match, it was more a spectacle sort of thing. Like, oh my God, Muhammad Ali. And at the time, Inoki was the world wrestling champion. So this was, in Japan, it was a sold out, huge main event that made millions of dollars. But it was like I don't know why people don't know about it today, because it was the first sort of MMA match in the modern era. Yeah, search it.
I'll find it. I'm going to find that footage, dude. That sounds like a good time. It sounds like a good way to waste half an hour of my day on YouTube.
But it started the company, and he always said, and he always wanted the foundations of Japanese pro wrestling to be based in real martial arts.
Yeah, word. Because fight sports are huge in Japan. Like, I don't think people in Aotearoa, New Zealand, like really understand. Like, it's like, would you say it's comparable to how we love rugby over there?
Yeah, I think it's bigger. I think the fight sport's bigger here than rugby is in New Zealand. Because there's like just 20 million people walking around in Tokyo. So 4 New Zealands just in Tokyo alone. And 2, the history of it. So all the big martial arts, karate, kickboxing, K1,
Jiu-jitsu,
sumo. Japanese have a cultural foundation in martial arts as well. So it's at that level, whereas rugby in New Zealand was what, the 1900s?
Yeah, sure. There's a lack of a depth of history here as opposed to Japan, because obviously Japan also had Pride as one of the foundational MMA tournaments. Bas-Rutten's Pancration stuff that was over in Japan.
So Bas-Rutten Pancrase, the guys from Pancrase, one of my senpais, one of my seniors that I actually had a match with the other day was King of Pancrase, Minoru Suzuki.
Wow.
I think Bas choked him out for the title, I think. But all of those right now, Rising is the sort of big promotion for MMA. They just had a show either yesterday or the day before. But yeah, it's still massive. I don't think it's martial arts or fight sports are going to go down anytime soon in Japan.
Yeah, because it's really ebbed and flowed here in New Zealand, because we had this period in like the early 2000s where Ray Sefo and Mark Hunt were really putting New Zealand on the map due to the popularity. K1, Doug Viney, K1 Las Vegas. But then it sort of died out after Dixie McIver's K1 in New Zealand sort of dropped off. And now it's come back up through mixed martial arts with, you know, Brad Riddell, Israel Adesanya, Dan Hooker, Kai, those guys really reclaiming New Zealand's spot in the, I guess, in the global arena. So it's interesting to hear that it's just been consistent in Japan. I wonder what that is culturally, like, apart from the size of the population. I wonder if there's a difference in how we enjoy combat. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think one thing that stands out for me is that Japanese, like the regular Japanese layman, respects the fight sport because he understands how much work goes into it. Where I think a lot of like boomer style Kiwis are just like, that's just that. They're just a bunch of hooligans punching each other in a cage sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, the reason why I was popular as a foreigner is because I came up through the dojo system. And I didn't realize normal Japanese people know what a dojo system is like. And they know you have to get smashed and do heaps of work. So they just automatically have this inbuilt respect for you. So I got here and I was shown more respect than I was shown back home. I was like, wow, this is weird.
So in wrestling, is the dojo system as in like a grading system, like there would be in karate or jujitsu?
No, a physical, so old school samurai style, sumo style. You live in the dojo. You don't go anywhere. You're
Ah,
there to wrestle. It's awesome, man. I think it's genuinely the ritual that made me become a man. So you live there, you get a room, you wake up in the morning, you clean everything, you cook for the seniors. So you cook your rice, you cook all they call it chanko, which is a big soup, and then you serve everybody. You go do the training, which could be 4 or 5 hours a day. After that, you clean some more. You do everybody's laundry. You shower. Everybody eats together. It's like that old school samurai style, like when they used to train to become samurais. They still have that culture here today. And yeah,
that's really interesting. That's really for me. That's really similar to my experiences going to Thailand and staying in a Kai Moi, like a Muay Thai camp, and like the young kids who have come from rural poverty often will get sent to Bangkok to stay at a Kai Moi, and they do a lot of like the more menial stuff, but they get food, clothes, shelter, and a livelihood through fighting. So
yeah, yeah,
it's quite interesting that Japan is that similar system.
yeah.
I was unaware of that. I mean, I think I was familiar with that in the sumo sense, which I know very little about, but that's what they do too, right?
Yeah, it's based off the sumo structure. So everything we do is kind of based off of the sumo style. I mean,
Mm.
wrestling them. So, and I mean, in sumo, they've still got that entertainment aspect as well. They're doing all the dances and the poses and the salt, and it's there's actually the big sumo tournaments going on right now, which I've been tuning into, which is pretty. It's so fun to watch, bro.
Where do they put that on? At like Tokyo Dome or something?
Ah, no, it's the sumo halls. They've got specific
Oh,
halls,
okay.
big stadiums for sumo, and it's amazing. Just the seats are all flat, so everyone's sitting cross-legged, folded arms, like very respectful. It's like even the fans are aware of the etiquette. So Japan's all about etiquette. It's all about manners. It's all about respect. So being there is like a huge. Like, you just feel. I don't know how to explain. It's just a different feeling. It's not the same as just sitting there watching a Western boxing fight where everyone's drunk and yelling at the fighters, sort of thing.
Yeah, word. Although Japan does have like a pretty heavy drinking culture as well.
Oh,
Like I've seen some pretty fucking wasted like salarymen like after work in my time in Japan.
yeah, they just it's like they think there's a belief that you have to drink in order to limit your stress or else you'll go crazy, which is
Right.
scientific opposite, right?
Yo,
Um,
they need
but
to follow my Facebook page.
yeah, oh man, I didn't drink at all before I got to Japan. But like culturally, it's very rude to decline a drink, especially from someone that's higher up on the higher hierarchy than you.
Yeah,
So
yeah, right. Okay. And so you kind of felt like an obligation to like buy into that, huh?
it's more the cultural obligation than I have to do what he says or else. It's like okay, I respect you, so I'll drink this. But I got to the point where I was drinking way too much. I went maybe 4 months without not drinking, which, as you know, is alcoholism.
Yeah, it's hitting. Well, it's hitting that way for sure.
Yeah.
Was that hard to adjust to Japanese culture? Like, where'd you grow up? Did you grow up in Tamaki here in New
Yeah,
Zealand? Yeah, right.
actually,
So,
like Pamua Glen Innes is where I
yeah,
grew up.
right. So was there like a real cultural disconnect? You were still pretty young when you moved over there.
Aside from the alcohol, uh, it was quite similar to Māori culture. To be honest, you respect your elders. If somebody tells you to do something, you do it. Even the language itself, a e I o u, ka ke kiko ku, is like this exact same pronunciation. And my auntie, growing up, my auntie was Japanese, so I was aware of sort of how they interact with each other. So it wasn't as much of a culture shock to me as it was with some of the American boys who even today are still like, I don't understand. So I adapted really well. I can understand Japanese. I could talk a little bit, but I understand more than I talk.
Yeah, right. Do you speak Māori as well?
Okay, this is the part that my own inner identity crisis. I speak and understand more Japanese than I can Māori.
Yeah, right.
Even though,
But I
and
mean,
it's
you probably didn't have an impetus to learn, right? Like,
yeah. So like for example, my last name is Henerae, but on my passport it's Henry. So during my dad's generation, obviously the older Māori generation were like not ripped, but like disconnected from their culture, right? So I was the next generation of disconnected urban Māori that you've probably read about. So I didn't have any way of learning. No, my parents didn't teach me how to speak Māori. Nobody else taught me how to speak Māori. So even today, like that pain that I feel right now of just embarrassment of not knowing my own culture, language, but knowing a different language that was taught to me is like, oof, that's one of my biggest battles right now.
really, you struggle with that because it's not your fault.
Yeah, I know. So I know it's not my fault, but I still need to take responsibility and try it. So I even spoke to my dad the other day. I was like, I want a Māori name. All 4 of my names, English, Anglo-Saxon names.
And so you changed your last name to Henerae from Henry by default.
I just know when I got to Japan, they said, "What name do you want to take?" My real name was Henare, so I'm going to take that name.
That's interesting. I think a lot of conservative commentators don't understand how would you describe it? The epigenetic transmission of lost self-esteem and mana from having your language taken from you.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
I don't know how to put words to it. Is what that's the struggle that I'm like, why do I feel?
Tell me how you feel. You don't need to have an academic answer. I don't give a fuck about like what academics say. I'm interested in how do you feel about that? How does it feel that your father never learned to speak Māori? Because in the 50s, our teachers hit kids who spoke Māori, like physically hit them. Like, what does that show up as in your life?
Because like half of my family is white as well, like white Kiwis. So when growing up, I didn't really distinguish. It wasn't until I got to intermediate that I realized most people's family are the same color. So I was like, well. But it's more just like my inner beliefs are all that like your DNA, your genetics is what makes you up, and everything social is what social things are external, but your genetics, your DNA is your DNA, and you can't change it. But to me, it's like, if that's the case, why can't I speak my own language? So it's like the inner identity crisis. I don't know if that's too lack of self-awareness or too aware of it, but it's something that I'm trying to fix. I was blessed enough that my uncle taught me the lessons. He didn't teach me Māori, but he taught me the culture that our people used to practice back in the day. So I used to do mauraka. I went to quite a few European Kiwi counselors. I used to be real angry when I was a kid, just one of those kids that used to just fight everyone. But then when he took me aside, we'd take off our shoes, go out onto the field next to the river, Tamaki history actually, and he'd just teach me all the positions, all the things. And that reconnecting was like, wow, you just feel a different sense of, how do I explain it? Have you seen Assassin's Creed?
I haven't seen Assassin's Creed.
So the whole concept of it is that he uses his genes to go back in time and experience what his ancestors experienced. So that's sort of like, wow, that's sort of filled that gap, filled that disconnect. So that I think if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have had the tools to survive outside. So that was my sort of masculine ritual in a sense.
Where do you think the violence you got into as a kid came from, man? Like, what did you have like a dysfunctional childhood, or you just you were just an angry kid? Like, where did that stem from?
I think I was just an angry kid. Maybe it was video games. I loved fighting games, but my parents are still together. They've been married. They've been together since they were 14. I wasn't abused, luckily enough. I don't have any childhood trauma, so I don't know. Maybe video games and maybe my obsession with wrestling. Everyone's just letting it all out. Well, I mean, I'm not ashamed of it. Maybe it was the wrestling, watching wrestling. Guys,
Yeah, that's interesting. And have you found that as you've gotten more proficient at actually knowing how to fight, you're less likely to street fight?
100%. I say it all the time. Wrestling saved my life, just like how you say fighting saved your life. I think if I didn't go to Dilworth Wrestling and actually like compete in physical combat with other guys and win, I think I would still be that kid. But yeah, especially when I started winning championships, I was like that sense of confidence took away my need to try to be macho. You know, I'm like, oh wow, this is cool. Wow, this is what it feels like to actually be a winner. This is quite cool. And as my life's progressed, I've just gone more and more mellow, you know?
Yeah, I do know. I do know, bro. Like, and I'm sure like a lot of my listenership or audience might relate if they're involved in martial arts, man. Because it's a universal story, man. And it's interesting to hear your take on that. I really wish more people understood that. And it's interesting to me that because I often talk about how like, dysfunctionality and all sorts of like problems in our youth often manifest as the crime we get into or the drugs that we abuse or our dysfunctional relationships as adults. It's interesting for me to hear that that wasn't part of your experience, but nonetheless, you were potentially heading down the pathway to jail if you hadn't changed. And it makes me think of a book that I'm like a third of the way through by Professor Good from Harvard called Carol Hooven. I saw on Joe Rogan's podcast, and she's written a book called T, and it's all about testosterone. Just like it's a scientific book around like the biology of it and how it plays out in male behavior. And I've always looked at things through a sociological lens because that's my academic training. But she writes, and I probably, if I could pick it up, I'd quote it better. But she does write that boys are, as males, more likely to be violent and act out in certain ways due to the higher amounts of testosterone in our systems. It's not something I know much about, but it's interesting for me to hear that you were just like an aggressive kid. Do you know?
I did the last video I watched before I went to sleep last night was from Professor, I think it's Solbritsky, and he was talking about the exact same thing about aggression in chimpanzee species, but he said that it's not testosterone that causes the aggression. He said testosterone causes whatever social structures are in place to be amplified. So if you're an angry kid, and you're given testosterone, you're going to be more angry. If you're the study was through chimpanzees, so there was the alpha chimp, B, C, D, and E, and they gave C testosterone. And what happened was that C didn't try fight the alpha, the higher ones. He got more aggressive to the ones below him. So the study was that whatever the social concepts that were in place were just amplified. So if he was aggressive, he would just be more aggressive in a sense. But the testosterone readings, what I've been into, you see, I just wrote it down. I'm loving learning about it because there's so much, I don't want to say disinformation because everyone says that these days, but misjudgment about testosterone and how it affects people. But I think, so over the last 50 years, I think it's dropped by about 40%. I can't remember the exact stat, but testosterone in men has dropped completely, and it's what's contributed to like male anxiety, male depression, and stuff like that. So that's the stuff I'm reading, which is amazing to learn about.
That's interesting. I had heard that levels of testosterone were reducing in males, but I was unsure about how that manifested, other than in physicality.
Yeah.
What do they attribute that to? Diet, lifestyle? Like, why is this happening?
I know Huberman's been like the guy for podcasts recently, so I don't want to just plagiarize what he says, but there's a big feedback loop between testosterone and dopamine. So if people are getting these high doses of dopamine from social media, from drugs, from alcohol, and the feedback is just because they need more and more dopamine each time. It sort of keeps pushing the testosterone down through that dopamine testosterone feedback loop. That's just one of the ways. So I know you talk a lot about refraining from porn and stuff like that, hookup culture. So I didn't really understand it when I first listened to what you said, but now I'm like, wow, this whole too much dopamine, too much exhausting your receptors, people being addicted. Addiction, dopamine's the addiction hormone, right? This stuff is all making sense, and I could see it in even my friends and in myself as well, being exposed to all that stuff real young. It's like, wow, things are just making sense. And as a man, I'm trying to do what you do and teach people that follow me, hey, these are things that we can fix right now. We just need to work on it in a way.
Oh, that's interesting, man. So you're really intentionally going out there talking about manhood, masculinity with
yeah.
your...
I'm not a hardcore feminist, but I do believe that most of the world's problems today are caused by a lack of masculinity, not the opposite. Because
talk to me about that.
As a man, I think it's our job to protect people, whether it's men, whether it's children. It's my inherent feeling is that I'm a man. Some people consider me a strong man, so I need to use that power in order to protect people. And I try to bring it back to the Māori sense in a way. Captain Cook himself, when he came to New Zealand, he wrote in his diary, the Māori men are the ones that tend to the children, not the women. It's often seen that the men have the babies straddled to their bodies and not the women, which he thought was real weird coming from England, right? But in our culture, it was the men were the protectors and the nurturers. So I think if it's happened in Māori culture, it's probably happened in other cultures. My dad's also Native American from a matriarchal line as well. So that's like another cultural dynamic that I've thrown in there. But yeah, I think a lot of the things in the world, abuse, assault, all of these things, all of these negative aspects, to me, I attribute to lack of masculinity, not an excess of it.
Right. Because when I think about masculinity, I'm thinking about the social expectations on boys and men to fit into traditional roles, right? Expected behaviors, and at least from an Anglo-centric worldview and from a Western worldview, a lot of those things are what we would call unhealthy, right? Like you have to be the boss at all times, you have to use violence, you have to consume and dominate women and brag about your sexual prowess and put down people who are soft and gentle and we're not vulnerable. But what I'm hearing from you is that you're saying that some traditional associations of masculinity or some traditional ideas around manhood and masculinity are actually healthy if we're talking about like First Nations people and indigenous people. Is that?
Yeah, in a sense, I'm not talking violence. I don't think violence is an inherent masculine quality.
No, yeah, me neither. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that like you're saying that colonization has created like a new, like has displaced a healthy masculinity.
Yeah, in a sense. But I also think when a lot of Māori talk about the white colonial way, I don't like because white, there's not a homogenous white, and this is what I struggle discussing with Māori people, with cultured ethnic people, is that their cultures as well. Like if you think of like Scottish culture, they're very traditional as well. They have their fashion, they have their cultural customs. Ireland as well, France, Spain, all these different cultures, and at the center of it was the family unit, right? But it's only since the modern liberal democratic era that the socio-political unit has moved from the family to just being the individual democratic voter, which I think is an important distinction that people miss out on. But because colonialism was relatively recently, we're still not too disconnected from that family unit. You probably know that Māori and Pacific Islanders, we don't think about ourselves as individuals. We think about the family as the unit still. But I think we've just had less time in that unitary system.
Well, I would, yeah. I would argue it's not a good system for any of us, but like Pākehā, Polynesian, Māori, anyone, because we are designed to be connected with one another. Like, yeah, I look at that through like a political reform from like 70s and 80s, the whole advent of neoliberalism, which has taken us from concepts around like worker solidarity to concepts of like extreme individualism, which is kind of why I carry a degree of frustration at this current focus on identity politics at the expense of everything else, which is not to discount intersectionality based around identity, but it's not everything. I think that we need more of a politics that looks at class and economics, because those affect all of us. Does that make sense? Like, there's far more in common between you and I, despite our different backgrounds.
So there's the quote I like. How the word diversity is thrown around a lot these days. There's a quote: "It should be about plurality, not diversity."
So nice. Yeah, that's nice. Who said that?
I can't remember, and I feel so bad not quoting. But I heard it in second year of uni. Second to last year, whatever the third year.
Right. I'm just finished reading. I'm trying to explore all of this stuff a lot, because it's really exploded into like the public consciousness. How we talk about ethnicity and race and privilege, and these are important conversations, and I really want to understand it so I can be part of the solution, I suppose, in my own small way. And yet a lot of what is trendy to me doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I've been reading as much as I can. And I just finished a brilliant book by Thomas Chatterton Williams, who wrote Self-Portrait in Black and White. He's he grew up in New York, African-American father, European mother, but always identified as Black. But he writes such a beautiful tale of his discovery of identity, and he takes you through this chronological journey, and it's very, very engaging reading, to when he married a white French woman and when he had his first daughter, and how it really shifted his ideas around race, to the point that he argues that race is a fiction, that biologically, apart from the color of our skin, the differences between all of us are far less to do with our bodies and their makeup, and far more to do with culture. And that's where I think the work lies, right? And that's why when you say there's not like a homogenous white, I'm like, yo, that's so true. There isn't, there's not a homogenous Black, and there's not a homogenous anything. Like, there's so much plurality, to use your word, within any sort of group of people, that I get frustrated when we talk about things as if Black and white are monolithic in their experience and their expression of the world, which doesn't discount the fact that, there are, that if you do have a fairer complexion, that life can be kinder.
Easier, yeah.
But it's not universal. And it's like, how do we have this very complicated, emotionally charged conversation to a point that positive change happens? Because I feel we're at this moment where everything is identity focused, and it actually seems to be like heightening racial tension rather than diminishing it, at least if social media is anything to go by. What do you think?
Yeah, I think everybody is obsessed with identity politics, but they don't understand what it is. So the way I understand identity politics is the main author not the main theorist for identity politics was Judith Butler, who was a critical theorist as well. I don't know if you know her, but it's all about what I dislike about it is the assumptions that people make, not even just about other people, but the identity politics causes people to think, I am XYZ, therefore I need to think this way. When I was at uni, people would presume what my beliefs or what my thinking was based on the fact that I was a brown kid in the class. Even I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's just like identity politics makes this assumption, and I think that's where you're saying that we need a conversation. There can't be conversations when all people do is assume. You're at this protest, so I assume you hate vaccines, or you got the vaccine, so I assume you're a sheep, sort of thing. That the identity, it's not even just about internal identity. Now everybody's assuming external identities, you know?
Yeah. I see that. Well, people are really attaching their identity to their political worldview. Like there's this, that's wild. People really embed this idea of who they are with what they profess to believe and think. And that strikes me as really shaky ground to build your sense of self on.
Yeah.
I was because that's because then you're always you never have like a strong self you know, like you've never got a strong self-esteem because it's based on all these externalities which are ever changing with the trends of thought in the moment rather than something more concrete and stable. Yeah, I was actually talking to a client this morning when I was teaching him boxing about this, you know, like it's interesting you mentioned that. And I don't think it's particularly healthy because then you get stuck in a position because that's who you're meant to be, right? I just want to go back to what you said, how people expected you to think certain things because of essentially your skin color, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Because to me, that's fucking racist.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So I don't like talking about him because no matter what you say, someone's going to hate you. But the whole Trump thing.
Yo, you're going to blow up my podcast, dog. No.
It's like, I'm a Kiwi. I'm not American, so I don't know what happens in America. I don't watch the news anymore. I've just cut myself off from all of that. But the second me as a brown person, no matter what I'm saying, mention Trump, everyone's just like, I don't even vote for him. I can't vote for him, and I don't care. But like, there's this presumption that you're brown, so you have to hate him. I don't have to hate anybody.
Yeah, that's interesting because you know who voted for Trump? Like a lot of Latinos and like African Americans, and like. Don't get me wrong, like I went to the effort of making a t-shirt that said make empathy great again, like to undercut the mega message, because I don't agree with Trump's politics as I understand them, or the way he presents to the world and what that's emboldened, not just in America, but throughout the world. Like I think anyone who lives in the West, at least, does need to pay attention to what happens in the United States because it does trickle down and influence everywhere else, you know. But yeah, that's interesting. I follow a whole range of really diverse voices the last 5 years, a plurality of voices who are, you know, gay, trans-identified, Black, Asian, and otherwise, who don't share the expected beliefs in politics of people of their identity group. And it's actually been really enlightening and refreshing to read their thoughts in order to have a deeper understanding of the world. You know, like that's kind of where I found myself, is like, I want to know what's true. I don't want to actually just feel good based on my presumptions.
That makes complete sense, but I don't know how to fix it, man.
I don't either. I just like talking to people, you know, like I just want to be a good person. You know, I want to be a good person I don't want you to be treated differently or your kids to be treated differently because of your skin color. I don't want, yeah.
Are you aware of Immanuel Kant at all, the philosopher?
Can't. No, I'm not familiar with. I was like, what? But then no, I'm not familiar with Immanuel Kant.
So
Enlighten me.
he's my favorite philosopher, and the main reason why is because he says his like central thing is just treat people as an end of themselves, not a means to an end. So I think a lot of all this identity politics and infighting and people arguing with each other, they're always presuming that we're working towards something else. And then in that vein, they justify it to themselves that they're allowed to throw other people under the bus because we're going there, we're heading that way. When instead, I think that defeats the purpose of wanting that ideal when you're just treating everybody badly, you know? So instead of working towards that ideal, why not just be there right here and now instead of
Give a change, right? Like, yeah, sure, we might still be on the journey towards, I don't know, a post-racial world or whatever.
Yeah.
And we're not there yet. But fuck, we can still act in a way that treats all people with dignity and respect in an equitable fashion, irrespective of whether the end goal has been met. Is that what you're saying? Am I paraphrasing that?
Instead of making that the end goal, just treat people.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I love that. I think that's important. I think it is important. I think that we can continue to work towards the advancement of a more just society, whilst at the same time doing our best in the present moment to treat people, I don't know, just with more basic kindness and respect. Yes. do you know what I mean? Yeah, I get. Every podcast conversation I have at the moment devolves into these breakdowns of the culture war. But fuck, it's so pervasive. How can it not? Although I must admit that I have like a preoccupation and fascination with it. Hey, back to wrestling. You nearly got crippled. Big segue here. You nearly got crippled. You had surgery in New Zealand. You're back in Japan. What's next for you? What's the time frame on all of this?
Oh no, so I didn't get surgery. There was they asked if I wanted surgery, and I said I'd rather not cut my neck open, please and thank you. So they gave me the option of doing hyperbaric oxygen therapy. I don't know if you're aware of it, but it's honestly, I believe it's the future of sports medicine. And I'm no hyperbaric therapy clinic has paid me to say that. But
if you're listening, hit him up because he will vouch for you.
No, it's great. Like so my spinal cord was compressed from the disc, but 30 hyperbaric sessions, they're pretty expensive, but it cleared up all that dead cells, and then my spine is no longer compressed. So June, July, August, September, October, 5 months it took just to fully heal my neck. And that's just from this one therapy that I think it's good for concussions as well. So any fighters that have had some sort of brain trauma, I think it's good. It's been proven to treat concussive damage in the brain. They even use it for some cancer chemo patients as well. It's pretty much just excess 2.5 times atmospheric pressure. So everything in your body expands, and it's 100% oxygen saturation. So everything expands and is pumped full of oxygen, which helps. The physio told me it was called phagocytosis in here, but it helps everything.
Wow, that's amazing. So you're back doing full contact wrestling again?
Yeah, which is amazing from a neck injury. You never hear it within that. But definitely as someone who's been fighting your whole life, I think you might not feel it, but it'll be beneficial to you.
Where can I do that in New Zealand? Is that available in New Zealand?
So there's a SLAC unit at the naval base. They use it for decompression. And there's quite a few around actually. I think City Kickboxing has a O2 chamber in theirs.
Okay, I'm into man. I got some injuries, man. That shit hurts and that limits my ability to do certain things. I'm gonna explore that. Thank you.
Yeah, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and there's tons of clinical evidence around it, and the treatments that it does. But I think specifically for athletes that have had physical trauma or surgery, it helps. So I had surgery on my Achilles as well a few years ago, but the doing the oxygen therapy sort of broke the scarring down. So on the inside, it like helped fix it. So I die on this hill of defending hyperbaric.
Bro, I've had a bunch. I've had about 4 surgeries. I might need a 5th, but I'm trying to avoid that. So
no.
yeah, I tore some cartilage in my knee just before the lockdown sparring. So I've been doing a good job rehabbing it, and I'm getting some PRP, like the plasma replacement.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's about $600. It's not subsidized, but if I can avoid another surgery, I'm for it, you know. So I'll let you know how that goes on me. Like, I'm optimistic, and I've been doing that ATG knees over toes bodyweight program. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, what was that, sorry?
ATG knees over toes program.
Oh, yeah. You're Steve Pipe as well, right? He loves that
Steve.
stuff.
Yeah. Steve Pipe. A guy called Devin Latour gave me an insight into it. Yeah. And it's been a few months, and actually I've reduced pain in my knee to like not quite 0, but it's huge for a ligament tear. And then I'm gonna get this PRP, and hopefully I can get back to like full contact sparring for a few more years, you know.
The new advancements in sports science have just been amazing. Like, I used to think you just go to the gym and do 3 sets of 10, and that's what's going to make you strong. Training with those guys at Les Mills, like Devin and Steve and Anna, they're all like the cutting edge of sports science. It's amazing. So yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. That, I mean, wrestling stuffs your body up. Just getting slammed on the mat every day. Muay Thai, you're getting kicked in the legs every day. It's going to take its toll. But this new sports science that has come out, it's just like amazing.
Yeah, it is. I wish it was around when I was fighting. You know what I mean? So athletes of today are really at an advantage, and I hope young fighters are really paying attention to what's out there. What's next with you, man? Like, are you in Japan for the foreseeable future? I imagine there's not a professional wrestling circuit here that makes it worth your time. So how long are you over in Japan for? Where does one go in wrestling?
That all depends on when Jacinda wants to let me in the country.
Oh yeah, right. Are you trying to get back, and then you're stuck to MIQ?
Lottery line, please.
Yo, I can't text the Prime Minister anymore, bro. I got in trouble for it one time, and then boom, no more texting.
So I've done 5 of the lotteries for the MIQ, and I haven't got a single room out of those 5 times. So I've done about 7 isolations during the pandemic already, including from 2020 until now. But this is the hardest I've ever found to get a room. It's literally a lottery. So it's all dependent on that lottery, whether I get home or not. So probably another Christmas in Japan, and probably another New Year's as well. But I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm one of these guys. It is what it is.
You got a partner and family stuff over there, bro? Or
Ellen, she's back home. She's probably I think her and Claire know each other. But
oh really? All right. Word. I'll have to hit her up. What's your girlfriend's name? Mew. Okay, cool. I'll ask Claire. It's a memorable name. Hey, brother, it's been really nice to catch up, man. It's been really nice to catch up.
Good.
It's how I started this podcast. Is lockdown last year, I just wanted to talk to people that I think are cool and interesting. Many of them are overseas, so I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your experiences with us. And I'll chat with you soon, my man.
Cool, bro. Thank you. Khop kun krap.